Hello, it's nice to see you again. Today, continuing from last time, I will explain the residential services among the CLBC services. Residential services are divided into three main categories. One is independent living, another is shared living, and the last is staffed living. So there are these three types. Independent living is a form of support provided to people with disabilities who are able to live somewhat independently, helping them with their daily lives. Shared living is for cases where it is difficult for someone to live independently. So usually there are cases where a caregiver moves into the home of the person with a disability to live together, or the person with a disability goes to live in the caregiver's home. This is called shared living. Staffed living is often referred to as a group home, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people always live in groups. In some cases, there are group homes where only one or two people live. So in the past, these were called group homes, but now they are referred to as staffed living because it depends on whether the person with a disability is supported around the clock in 3 shifts or not. So the type of living arrangement where people receive assistance from hired staff 24 hours a day is referred to as staffed living. Now I will explain each of these three types in more detail. Independent living. This is a form where a person with a disability lives independently while receiving assistance with daily living. Usually, support is provided either one-on-one or one-to-many. Let me give you an example here. An example of support for independent living is the chorus apartments provided by the Semiahmoo House Society. It was completed in 2016, and the total cost of the project was about $15 million, with 71 units in total. Out of these, 20 units were rented or leased to people with developmental disabilities. The remaining 51 units were rented to the general public. In particular, the Semiahmoo House Society is located in Surrey, and this project offers rental units to residents of Surrey or White Rock at prices lower than the local market rate. By doing this, they were able to receive partial funding from the government for the cost involved in this project. So, what kind of support do they provide? The Semiahmoo House Society has a support team. This team helps the 20 residents with developmental disabilities living in chorus apartments with things like cooking, cleaning, budgeting, and social activities. This was successfully launched in 2016, and now the second project is underway. According to the news, the goal is to complete it by 2026, and about 90 units are being built. To briefly show you a picture, this is what the apartment looks like. Inside, people with developmental disabilities and non-disabled people live together. This one was taken from the front, and this was taken from the back. I've actually visited the apartment, and it's very clean, and the environment is excellent. Also, right in front of the apartment is the Semiahmoo House Society, so staff can provide immediate support in this environment. Here and Now is not yet supporting independent living, but we also hope to carry out a project like this to help people with developmental disabilities. Next, the second type is called shared living. As I mentioned earlier, there is home sharing and living support. Home sharing is when a person with a developmental disability goes to live in the home of a home share provider. In other words, the home share provider accepts the person with a developmental disability as a member of their own family and lives together with them like family. A living supporter refers to a form where a supporter moves into the home that a person with a disability owns or rents, lives together with them, and provides assistance. Whether it's home sharing or a living supporter, no more than 2 people with developmental disabilities can live in one house. If there are more than 3 people, it becomes a group home, so home sharing is not allowed. Now, whether it's independent living or staffed living, this process basically requires funding. So you need to apply for funding. Of course, when applying, you might say, I hope my child can do independent living. Or you might say, I hope they can do shared living, and apply accordingly. Once you apply like that and it gets approved, then the funding will be decided later. But since it takes quite a bit of time from application to decision, it's best to proceed with plenty of time. Now, once the funding is approved and decided, you will choose an agency. If you don't know any agencies, well, and that's as I mentioned last time, the CLBC will provide you with a list of 3 agencies. Then you visit those agencies one by one and choose the one that is most suitable for your child. And once the agency is chosen, you will start working with that agency to find a home share provider or a living supporter. The living environment needs to be suitable. The personalities of the people, living together need to be compatible, and various factors have to align for a good match to be made. So once you've found such a match, the next step is for both parties to discuss and agree that they're compatible, and if so, then the arrangement begins. During this process, the agency screens the home share providers or living supporters. They check criminal records, require first aid training, and screen various aspects such as the living environment and whether the people living there are suitable. Only when everything is deemed appropriate does the matching take place. Even after it starts, they continuously monitor to ensure that our children with disabilities can live safely and happily. The most important thing here, despite all the monitoring and systems in place, is ultimately the communication and mutual cooperation between the home share provider and the families. In most cases, it often ends due to small emotional reasons. Of course, sometimes it ends because the child with a disability is having a hard time, but in many cases, it ends because the relationship between the parents and the home share providers becomes emotionally strained. So, what I have felt is extremely important while doing this is communication. We need to communicate frequently and honestly with each other and be considerate of one another as we discuss what is best for our child. From the parents' perspective, since they've entrusted their child to another family, they can't help but worry and keep a close watch. As a result, there may be more micromanagement, but it's important to handle that appropriately. Also, from the perspective of the home share provider, although they are being paid for this work, it is not an easy job. So even though they work hard, they may feel disappointed when parents don't fully recognize their efforts. Because of this, both sides can find the communication process somewhat challenging. So I want to emphasize that it is really important to be fully aware of these things and to communicate well with each other in advance. There are pros and cons to both home sharing and live-in support. The advantage of home sharing is that since your child moves into another family's home, there is no need to prepare a separate house for them. And if you can find a home share provider who is a good match, that's really the best because it can last for a long time. But the problem is that quite often these home share providers don't stay for that long. What this means is that they change frequently. Sometimes if things don't work out, it can change after just 2 or 3 months, or it might last a year, 2 years, or even 10 or 20 years. But statistically, I heard that it changes about every 2 years. So when things change, what kind of problems arise? Because our children with disabilities are sensitive to routines. If the person changes and even the house changes, they have a really hard time. And it's not at all easy to find a new home share provider for individuals or families in need. So this issue almost always remains a major and ongoing problem with home sharing. What can at least somewhat help to alleviate or improve this situation is the presence of a live-in supporter. Of course, the live-in support system has the drawback that the child must have a home, but if there is a house, whether it's rented or owned, then even if the provider changes, there is no need to move homes. So we can say that the difficulties our children experience can be relatively reduced. Lastly, I will explain a bit about staff living arrangements. Usually this involves 3 or more people with disabilities living together, but as I mentioned earlier, there are cases where only 1 or 2 people live together as well. In cases where there is only one person, it is usually because their problematic behaviors are so severe that they might attack others, making it impossible for them to live with 2 or 3 people. In these situations, instead of a home share arrangement, staff members work in 3 shifts to provide continuous 24-hour care. As an example of this type of group home, I often mention the L'Arche community. In Vancouver, there is an organization called L'Arche Greater Vancouver. If you look at L'Arche International, there are 180 L'Arche communities in 38 countries. There is a very famous person named Henri Nouwen. He was a priest, and there is a record of him spending the rest of his life after joining the L'Arche community in Toronto. There are 31 L'Arche communities in Canada, and the one in Vancouver is called L'Arche Greater Vancouver. Recently, in 2024, L'Arche Greater Vancouver demolished its existing building and constructed a new one. It was a major project that cost about $3.7 million. I visited 7 or 8 years ago before this project started, and although the facilities weren't that great, at the time I could still feel that the people with developmental disabilities living there were receiving really good support. Now that the facilities have improved as well, it must be even better. So I have included a video link for L'Arche below. If you're interested, please check out the video link. There's an explanation about L'Arche as well as an introduction to the new building, so I hope you'll find it helpful. The building on the left is the old L'Arche building from the past, and the one on the right is the recently constructed L'Arche building, which has been built very neatly and nicely. Just like in the course apartments I mentioned earlier, there are regular residents as well as friends who live together in our group home, all living together in this place. Inside here, they run day programs, participate in various social activities, and live together as a community, sharing meals and spending time together. It's truly a wonderful community. So today, I have explained about CLBC residential services. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to contact me separately. That concludes today's explanation, and next time I'll be back with another topic. Thank you for watching until the end.